Okay, welcome. So today is our move into stillness meeting. And we're going to explore today very subtle movement. So you're going to want to be in a posture that you're going to be able to inhabit for a while, ideally without falling asleep. So perhaps if even for that reason alone, if possible, it would be great if you could sit upright. If you're able to sit upright without leaning back against something, that would be excellent. The reason for that, so it doesn't need to be like a great mystery. I mean, it remains a great mystery because there may be other reasons why, but among the reasons why is because that way you're able to feel more. So it does not have the tendency to send you into sensory motor amnesia. So you'll recall perhaps from earlier meetings when we've talked about sensory motor amnesia, that's the framework that we're looking at things from, looking at our experience in those terms in these meetings. So we say sensory motor amnesia is where your conscious portion of your brain has lost the ability to properly understand and to understand the signals that are coming in and to properly be able to send signals, to issue commands over the muscles of the body or some parts of the body. So you could have sensory motor amnesia to varying degrees. You could have sensory motor amnesia in various parts. So you might have sensory motor amnesia somewhere in your right thigh and radiating outward from there. So it's like there's a center to it, we could say, but it affects the whole body. It radiates out from there. And it may be so great, it's a 90% you can't walk. Maybe somebody else has very similar, some SMA, similar location, but it's only 10%. So they walk, but causes them some discomfort. Maybe their knee hurts, maybe their hip hurts. Okay, so if you're leaning back against something, generally, not always, but generally, that's going to add some extra challenge. It's going to have a tendency, you're going to have a tendency to lose some awareness of that area. It will kind of go numb. Makes sense because your brain is just saying, hey, that part doesn't need to move. It's fixed there. So I don't need to give any energy to it. But of course, then because we're really we're this kind of like a razor's edge. We don't want to fall to either side of it. We don't want to become so comfortable that we fall asleep. We don't want to, and not just physically what we call sleep, but asleep mentally, where we're sort of daydreaming. We want to be aware, conscious. And we want to also not go so far to the other extreme where we're so uncomfortable and overwhelmed by the sensation. Yes. So there was a question about, would you say not to lean forward as well? Yes. So ideally you want to be, if you're sitting, you want to be vertical. So we'll get into some of the exploration that should help support that, but you're wanting to just get started in a good situation. But then you see, maybe for some people who are not accustomed to sitting upright, it took me years actually of practicing sitting upright, like sitting on the floor, sitting on the ground, before it started to be doable for me. It used to be, had so many problems. I couldn't do it for so many reasons. I say, oh, my back hurts. Oh, it's too fatiguing. Oh, my legs hurt. My legs when I would sit cross-legged, my legs would go to sleep. My feet would go to sleep. I would become afraid. So if you're in that position, then, when I was starting, I mean, to be honest with you, I wasn't completely dedicated through the entire time, but this process for me started at least in around the year 2000, 2001, when I started practicing transcendental meditation. And I had it in my, my mind that the proper way to do it would be to sit cross-legged. So I was attempting that, but I couldn't even begin to think about doing that sitting on the floor. Despite the fact that at the same time I was going to take, yogasana courses every day. Actually, I was doing classes every single day. Um, but I wasn't improving. So I was sitting on a futon. It was padded and I was leaning, it was folded so I could lean back against it. More often than not, I fell asleep. Other times I wasn't sure if I had been asleep or not, but I think in retrospect, I was not asleep. The body, in a sense, was asleep, but I was awake. Because of the posture, because of that reclining position, supported in that way, I wasn't able to easily distinguish between them. But this is all possible. You can learn to distinguish between true wakefulness and the states of the body. And this is one of the many benefits of this kind of exploration of somatics. Because if you aren't able to distinguish between the true wakefulness and the states of the body, then you're forever chaining yourself to the states of the body because you're trying to manage it all the time, rather than having a more useful perspective, which comes from being able to recognize wakefulness. That puts you in a position where you can begin to have a more beneficial relationship with your whole self, rather than this constant management and siloing of the various selves. There can be a proper unification of a singular self with many aspects that can all be attended to without losing the awareness of the self. So this is what we want, whether we know it or not. We want to be awake all the time, because when we're awake, suffering is impossible. Fear is impossible. Anger cannot take root. You cannot be confused, taken advantage of. You cannot be harmed or injured, because in a total state of not self-knowledge, then regardless of what happens apparently or experientially, it's known who I am. I am beyond all these arising appearances. So choose a posture that you can inhabit for a little while. Could be sitting in a chair, sitting slightly toward the front of the chair, feet on the floor. It could be sitting in a comfortable cross-legged position on a floor. It could be sitting on the edge of a bed. It could be in a sitting against, on a firm chair against the back. It could be sitting in an office chair. It could be sitting on a sofa. It could be in a recliner. It could be lying down on the floor. It could be lying down in a bed. So you choose, but just whatever the posture is, you want to be well supported, and ideally not so cushioned that it tends to make you numb to yourself. So you want to have sensation, but it should not be overwhelming. I hope that taking 12 minutes with that instruction that I've made it clear. I laugh because Because I am not always clear about that myself, despite the fact that I'm the one who has to remember it in order to share it. So I know the difficulty of it. So I appreciate the difficulty of it. And if you're able to do it at all, then that's very excellent. And even for a moment is good. So always know that if you can really take the spirit of the instruction to heart, and you can really discover that true effortlessness, that true surrender, that true support, even just for an instant, then that's a blessing. So that's a good thing. It's very good. And know that the more often that happens, the more you know how to touch upon it. And the more that you know how to touch upon it, the more you trust it, the more that your faith becomes, belief becomes faith, and faith becomes uh, a known reality. So ideally, you're not going to fall asleep. But if you have to lie down, then you have to lie down. And I've been there, done that, because in my exploration, that too, I have done. In those early days, I had those early days that I described, and then many years went by, a lot of struggles and challenges and confusion, and my body took a lot of uh, injury as a result of my fear and confusion. And so when I really became sincere, came back around to this exploration in earnest a number of years ago, my body was so painful that and so fatigued, so exhausted that I did not feel that I could stand. For I wanted to be able to do a standing uh, qigong uh, meditation, and I couldn't do it. I was too fatigued, and so I had to sit, but I couldn't sit because it hurt too much, and so I had to lie down. And so I would lie down, and I lied down for a long time, for many years. So you just have to start where you are. You have to know yourself and start where you are. And if you've done both of those things, then you've succeeded. It's the amazing thing about it is that if you can just go to the beginning, then your success is already completed. Okay, so now, uh, as long as it's safe and okay for you to do, I recommend you close the eyes, because, as I said, we're going to do an exploration that's going to be subtle movement. So it's good to do other grosser level movements, and we often explore those. And of course, they're going on. The breathing is happening, so you can always notice the breath, notice that movement, and allow that movement to be conscious, slow, smooth, gentle, all the things that we talk about in terms of how to have success with somatic exploration. So every movement should, during the somatic exploration, at least when consciously engaged in it, every movement, to the best of your ability, should be attended to with those qualities in mind. So that it's actually, in this sense, it's not even that the movement of the breath has to be controlled to be those things, but rather it's actually more about your relationship with the breath. It's more your attitude. It's about what you're willing to bring to it. Because if you notice, if you say, I'm going to make the breath gentle, and you're trying to make the breath gentle, the breath becomes rough. The breath becomes like a horse that has been, wants to be free, but it's tied. And so it will pull, and it'll be uncomfortable. So you have to have, it has to be your attitude, your relationship that is gentle, patient, slow, slow to anger, slow to irritation, slow to impatience, because these really are the enemy of what you want, you see. But all day long, you're starting to notice. So this is a training for your life. Okay, so you can start to notice how it's true as you reflect on your life that all day long, this is really what you're struggling with, is the quickness to the struggle, the quickness to the pain, the quickness to the worry, the quickness to the anger, quickness to the depression, the quickness to the whatever, the resignation, the quickness to the negativity. That's what you're wrestling with all day long. You seem to feel that you can never get ahead of it. It's always got you beat. But so you just keep trying harder and harder and harder and harder, and it wears you down because you're like trying to hold that stallion on the rope that wants to be free. And, that's a 2,000-pound animal. You're not going to win. So the, so we need to bring to those qualities within ourselves and to shine those qualities on everything that we are aware of. So you're aware of the breath, and you're aware of that movement, and you're aware of the feeling, and allow this gentleness to shine from your heart to the experience, so that rather than you trying to control it and shape it, you're like the sun sending its healing rays, and the moon sending its cooling rays. So and incidentally, you can even reflect on those. Notice that as you're breathing, that our breath has, normally I talk about 4 phases, but here we want to just keep it really simple with the symbolism and just see 2, just an in breath and an out breath. And notice that this, because the other phases of the breath are really, they're not distinct from the breath. They're the singular space in which the 2 are happening. So that gap, that emptiness, that space is the eternity in which the in breath and the out breath are occurring, so that you can understand the in breath and the out breath like the sun and the moon, so that you can reflect on those qualities and you can notice how that can help you to experience that inner poise and support. So then you can notice the lowest part of yourself. Now, this will depend on what you conceive of as lowest, and what you conceive of as depends on your orientation and what you're orienting to. But let's say if you're sitting upright, it could be, we'll keep it to the lowest point in the trunk, the torso, that you are aware of presently. And I want you to just notice that area, notice the quality of it, notice what your relationship is. What I mean by that is, how do you react to it? Do you experience openness, or is there apprehension? Do you have a sense of clarity or fogginess? So those are your relationship. That's your projection. And then you can just notice that there's that projection, and then there's just the actual essence of that area. So you just place your bare attention there, So you can differentiate between your projections and the reality of what's actually here. So you're just noticing, and it doesn't, I'm just saying the lowest point in your torso that you're aware of. It's whatever that means for you. Don't make the mistake of thinking that there's I'm pointing to one specific place that you have to locate, and if you can just find that one secret place, then everything will be okay. Instead, you want to, I mean, there is that secret place, but that's you. You're already looking from there. So here, don't look for the secret place, look for the actual experience that's found here. And just notice, independent, you have ideas, you have notions, there's mental projections, images, thoughts, whole constructed reality that's often somewhat vague, but not necessarily always, about what this is. So depends on you and where you're looking at, but for some people it might be perceived as unbearable. For some people it might seem empty. For some people it might seem uptight. For some people, so many different notions of it. But you can, hopefully, what I'm wanting you to notice is that those are all projections. Those are all ideas that you've developed. And they're functioning automatically all the time. And those are the reactions. And when you believe them, then that is what your whole life becomes. Your life just becomes one long reaction, one reaction after another, after another, after another. And you're powerless to do anything about it at that level. No matter what you do, it's another reaction, which just leads to another reaction and then another one, no matter what. But there is a way out, and that's what we're looking at. So you can notice that there's a temptation there. There's a tendency. It's like things just want to go in that direction because there's a habit to interpret it a particular way, to perceive a certain way, to start thinking a certain way. Just notice whatever is coming to you in your mind, in your thoughts, in the mental images, and notice, do you like it? You feel comfortable? You feel relaxed? You feel supported? You feel safe? Are these the words that you come to mind to describe the experience, or is it something else, like in pain or uncomfortable, or frustrated or impatient, or whatever it may be? So you want to see that there's a difference between the mental overlay. Normally we don't see the gap because we're too fast, but here we're looking very slowly. So we can see there actually is a gap between the bare reality of what is. So we're just noticing somatically this area in the lowest part of the trunk that you can be aware of. And it's up to you what that size of that area is too. I'm not giving you too many constraints here, because I want it to be, you can find the very best entry point for you if you just follow the instructions sincerely without getting hung up anywhere. Let it be flowing. And you can notice then that there's a habitual reaction or reactions that occur, and a good number of them you don't like. Now, sometimes it happens that there'll be something that you say, oh, I like that. Maybe you have a sense, some experience of opening, or what you would consider to be support or safety, and you say, oh, that's so good. Well, that turns into its own problem. So if you find that happening, just notice then the tendency to go asleep. And if you go to sleep, then you'll fall down again and you'll get hurt. So just do your best to remain awake. But for most of us, most of the time, what we're going to find is some kind of sense of something unwanted. That's usually what stands out, in a sense. Now it could be, notice how it manifests. There'll be thoughts like, I can't, or it's too hard, or I'll never make it. Any of these kinds of thoughts, or I'm almost there. I just have to hold on. I just have to try harder. And see, whatever the thoughts are, those are just examples, but whatever thoughts manifest, I want you to see the connection between those and the actuality of what's happening, and see that the connection is fundamentally false. It's only out of habit that the two are paired. It's only because of the repetition over and over and over. Here's this somatic experience, and here's this bundle of thoughts, and they co-arise, and so we take them to be one and the same. But if you start to really look, what you'll see is that regardless of whether you like the projections of the mind, you don't actually really know for sure what this experience is. You don't really know. You just have some ideas that you've repeated so often. And you've repeated them so often that you have now, in many cases, as we have all done, constructed this big, very elaborate, detailed world in which that's the center of it. Everything depends upon that. Like, you wouldn't be you without this. And if you're not you, then who are you? And that's not safe. So if you say, well, this feeling is a feeling of unsafe, then you say, well, see, I can't do otherwise because it's unsafe. I have to hold on to it. It's who I am. So this is going on, whether you consider it I'll call it unsafe or pain or quick to anger or whatever, uh, incapable, incompetent, stupid, whatever labels, whatever stories are attached. Just see those are the stories, and then there's the direct reality. So now, of course, I want you to also be aware of the rest of yourself. So don't just go numb to the rest of you. So we want to integrate our awareness of, this bare awareness of this area with the broader sense of the self. So don't go numb to the rest of yourself. So be aware. See how you have that power that you can kind of open up. So you can notice, for example, you could notice a little higher up in the torso, just a little bit. How is that? And notice that without trying to let go, without trying to align yourself, without trying to relax, but nonetheless, perhaps having those intentions generally, but not trying, because the trying would be born out of your past ideas, which none of which were adequate, obviously, because they didn't give you the results that you wanted. So instead of trying, you're just utilizing awareness. You're just directing the awareness, and you're noticing, because there's just an underlying intention, not an attempt to impose it, but just an underlying intention of relaxation, of alignment. Then when your attention goes there, automatically, whatever it is that seems to be incongruent with that desire, automatically you can notice it's just like darkness, and the light shines and it dissipates if you allow it. It's not like flipping a switch in that sense. You actually have to attend to it. You have to be present, but it's something of that nature. You'll notice if you just attend to it, not trying, but just noticing with the lightly held intention of deep relaxation, alignment, peace, surrender, support, rest, then you notice automatically those areas that are held, braced, tightly against something that we fear might happen. So you can just notice, and with that light intention there, it just dissipates like magic. And you're still aware generally of the whole body, the whole self. That you also start to move the attention a little bit higher up in the torso. So you're just noticing bit by bit, upward through the torso. And you can continue in this way, just noticing without trying. But you'll see that as you do it in this way, see, it's a very subtle movement. It's a movement that's not it's not the kind of movement that we are usually focused on. We're usually focused on movement that's it's a particular phase of, it's represented in a particular phase of muscular movement. It's there's a word for it, which I'm not thinking of at the moment. The opposite of which is the eccentric contraction. So there's a contraction in which the muscle contracts while shortening. That's the first phase, and that's the one that we normally think of, because that involves us exerting ourselves in a particular way. It's like the solar quality. Do it. But we forget about the great importance of that lunar quality, to actually bring it all the way into to its completion. So on the eccentric phase, also very important, but that's where we normally lose our awareness. And so bit by bit, things creep in because we forgot how to let go all the way. So these last little things that we find, these little bits that are there, they're the action, the movement is a movement of release. It's the mirror of the action that we normally think of as the doing. It's the complement. It's equally necessary, or at least we could say necessary for the complete resolution of the action. Remember, I said most people are operating just as this seemingly endless sequence of reactions, and it's because there's never a completion, there's never a complete resolution. And so we're offering ourselves that opportunity. It's a learning experience. It's different than what we're accustomed to. That's the important part. So what you'll find in the process is all the little bits, like the seeds of all of the things that we don't like are there. And if we allow it, they'll spook us, or we'll get spooked. And then we contract again. And then we wait until we think it passes, which is just to say we've gone numb again. We've just gone back to sleep, and we've forgotten about that bit that we are holding on to, and we don't know it. So here we're saying, okay, let's do this very differently. Rather than the way that I've been doing it, which is to be asleep most of the time, only to be startled every once in a while by ghosts. And then I just pray and hope they'll go away, and they seem to, because I go back to sleep. We want to say, no, I want to be awake. I want to see what's really here, because I've had enough of the old way, which was too painful and not who I really am. So, okay, so maybe you've managed to work your way up somewhat, or all the way through the body, the torso, maybe up into the head. It's up to you. But now I'm going to invite you to the next stage of this So we can do this in a variety of ways. One way is that we can do it in a like a what we might call real time fashion, which is to say, as the content arises, we simply meet it in this way. So what I mean by that is that as you're going about your life, so that's why I say this is like training for your life. As you're going about your life, you can start to notice when those contractions occur, when when there's an activation of those seeds of fear, anger, resentment, frustration, and so forth. By which I mean those things that we habitually interpret in that way. So just to be clear, but they're somatic experiences that are interpreted in that way. So this is very good that we can develop and cultivate this skill. In other words, you're going about your life. Somebody says something to you, and you notice this gripping that takes place somewhere in you. And you notice thoughts about angry thoughts that arise. You can practice right then and there because you have the awareness. You can do this right there in real time. You notice, oh, there it is. And, oh, I want to shout at him. I want to slap him. And, I'm going to show them. And you can just notice that there's the overlay, which is not you. It's not yours. You don't want that. That's not true for you. It's a hostile spirit, maybe takes you over, but it's not you. It's not how you choose. So it's up to you to choose, which means you have to notice that's not me. Those are my thoughts. That's my conditioning. Those are my habits. And that's an overlay on top of this. It's a narrative to give some meaning to this somatic experience, this gripping. But I don't want any of it. It's not useful to me. This is my friend. And if you don't think it's your friend, then you need to do work to see that it's your friend. This is a good thing to do, to see that everybody is everybody. There are many ways that you can understand it. One way that works for me is to see it through the lens of that we've all, if you think of it just metaphorically, just as a story, at least, that we all have been born many times, countless times, and so everybody has been in every relationship with everybody. Everybody here has at some time been your enemy, and at some time been your lover, and at some time been your mother, and at some time been your savior. And in fact, they're all of them right now. It's all up to you. And so when you find, this anger or whatever, it's just one example, but you find that, then it's up to you to notice, this is the poison that I don't want. So I refuse to drink this poison. And instead, I will see clearly and know that though the thoughts are saying that it's this, I'm angry and it's this person's fault, and here's all the reasons why, and here's why I should indulge this and how I should behave. I know that that's actually not true. And so I just let that come and go. And I observe the somatic experience, and I notice that when I hold true to what I really want, my true intention, which is peace, then with that intention held lightly, with the attention directed where the somatic experience is noticed, miraculously, I can begin to experience the letting go of it. So I hope that that is clear to you, because the next stage is going to depend upon your ability to recognize that to some degree. Because what I'm going to next suggest to you is that now, so I've said that that's one way to do it, and it's a good way, and I encourage you to do it in that way, which is what I call like in real time in your life as things are occurring. And you can also do this in a more expedient fashion when you have time and interest to do so, by intentionally provoking those things. So that is to say, if you see that you have that all of the problems that you struggle with have these two components to them. There's a thought component and there's a somatic component. That is, you feel it and you have a story about it. If you don't have both of those, you can't have a problem. If you simply feel, but you don't have a thought about it, you don't have a problem. If you have a thought without a feeling, you don't have a problem. You have to notice that, because you can have the thought boogeyman and you have no problem until you add into it the feeling that you consider to be terror. As soon as you've got those two things, then you have a problem, and then you're trying to search for a solution to your problem. So so we're seeing that these are two distinct things that just happen to co-arise out of habit. Maybe it just happened once upon a time, that they happened together on accident, just as pure coincidence. But because that moment was so charged, these two things became paired in your conditioning, so that thenceforth they tend to co-arise, because you call them, when one appears, you call the other one, in a sense. And so, if you think about the thing, you get the feeling. If you have the feeling, you think about the thing. They call one another. And so we want to see that they're distinct. They don't have any relationship other than just habitual co-arising. That's it. Otherwise, completely unrelated. Second thing is, see that I don't want to have them paired any longer. It's not helpful. And the comment that says the feeling seems to be a feeling of tension, that's fine. You start there. But we want to see, okay, I don't want that. I don't want that interpretation. That's not true. That's not the truth of my soul. The truth of my soul, which I know to be a fundamental goodness, is what I experience as goodness. So if I'm experiencing what I consider not to be goodness, it just means that that's what I'm focusing on. I'm just focusing on the thing that I don't want, and I'm overlaying that. And because there happens to be a feeling that happens to also be paired in my consciousness with this particular kind of thinking, and because there's a charge associated with it, maybe, that seems like there's no way out, but there is a way out. You have to just see, even if only just a little bit, that these are two distinct things that don't necessarily, at the very least, that they don't necessarily go together inherently, that they've just been paired. And I know that can be challenging if there's a really strong charge, and if the feeling happens to be very intense, then I understand that sometimes that can be challenging. But nonetheless, I find it's enormously helpful, consistently helpful, to be willing to see that these are two distinct things that they're not the same, and they don't inherently go together. Okay. So when you can do that, and then you gain more skill at remaining aware of your somatic experience and having this light attention and intention that allows for the uh, the gripping and the tension and the armoring and all of that that creeps up to dissolve, then what you have now is this kind of a crucible for something really wonderful, because now you can begin, as I say, to consciously provoke those things so we can understand them, like the the seeds of the evil in our lives that are there, latent tendencies uh, that of the things that we don't want, the fear, anger, resentment, guilt, shame, hostility, violence, so forth. And so we can we can consciously provoke them. So you can call to mind some thing, some situation, or some person uh, that provokes, for now, we'll just say some mild to moderate unpleasantness in your experience. Should not be extreme for now, because I want you to have confidence with the approach before you try anything extreme. But it will work just the same for something that's extreme, but you will be better off having confidence about it before you try to apply it there. So you just call that to mind, and notice that as soon as you call it to mind, if you really do it in an authentic way, if you're not shying away from it, if there really is some conditioning there, some conflation of the two in your conditioning, then you will not only provoke the thought, but also the feeling. So what I want you to do is try and provoke the feeling as much as you can. Obviously, not so much that it will be overwhelming to you, which is why I suggested it should be just mild to moderate, not anything very intense. So if we were to say, have this imaginary scale of intensity of experience from 0 to 10, 10 being the maximum, then we're wanting to keep it probably in the realm of probably 3 to 5, 3 to 6, somewhere in there. So just notice then that when you have the thought and you have the feeling, then even though you can recognize this as happening in your imagination, the thing isn't happening externally, it's happening in your imagination. Your experience is the same, at least to some degree, as if it were happening externally. Because you can see that what comprises this thing that you think is about the person or place or situation is these two components, the thought and the feeling. So the thought and feeling combined give rise to the experience of the problem, as we would call it. So now notice that you can choose to let go of the feeling. Not try to get rid of it, not try to let it go, but just you can not just have the intention that you can notice somatically where this is felt, and you can just place your attention there with this light intention to allow it to dissolve and to receive the support, or to surrender to the support that's inherent here. And then notice that it's true. Notice it's really, really true that you can, as you let go or as you allow for that dissolving, no matter how big or small it might seem, nonetheless, there is the actual reality, and this is important, is that you're okay. You are supported. You didn't die. You weren't stabbed. You you haven't probably haven't fallen over. I hope you have not fallen over. That would be surprising if you had. Um, but so you can do that. You can actually be willing to let that feeling dissolve. That feeling that all along was indicating that there was some danger that you needed to protect against. You can actually choose to let that dissolve.
So much clover in my garden.
I'm going to look at that comment in just a moment. When you let go, then you notice I am okay in this moment. Now, the next thing might arise. There might be another thought that says, yeah, but there's still some discomfort and whatever. But that's fine. All of that's fine. It's the goal here is not to instantly arrive at some perfected state. It's just increasing self-awareness, increasing awareness. And so you can notice then that when you do this, then in this moment, if you rate the intensity of the experience on that same scale from 0 to 10, you'll probably notice in most cases, not always, but in most cases it's lower. Now, what can sometimes happen is that sometimes the intensity increases because in that surrender, then there's something else that was not noticed previously that comes to the surface. So you can repeat the same process because it works the same way, which is that you just notice that, okay, there's sensation and there's feeling and there's thought. And I can let that sensation dissolve. I can let go just through awareness and gentle intention, not ever through force, not through trying to get it right by rearranging myself, but to actually surrender bit by bit in a safe, gentle way. Then what happens is that the the seeming substance of the problem also dissolves, and so you'll be left eventually with the thought alone, without the uh, the feeling being conjured, so that you can have only the thought. You can choose the thought. You can consciously think the thought. Think a particular phrase if you want. Whatever. Think of a particular image, a particular scene, whatever it is, and you can actually notice that eventually it doesn't in any way dredge up the feeling, because the feeling has been thoroughly dissolved from its association with the thought. So, I should say, it's very powerful. So I guess be somewhat judicious about your use of it at first, at least, and be sure that these are things that you actually are willing to, maybe I should have said that from the beginning, but these are things you're actually willing to to be free of. Because if you do this, you will be free of them. I mean, you have to do it all the way and sincerely, but you'll invariably see that what I've just described is true. That through this simple process that I've just walked you through, you can meet any experience, and all experience is, when met in this way, is a what we could consider a healing and truly spiritual experience. That does not mean every experience will be like some sort of dramatic fireworks display or a psychedelic kind of experience, but it means that it will be a truly spiritual, deeply real experience that is absolutely free and um, that's available, that's possible. So that that is true, and also you can furthermore uh, through specific focused application of this, you can liberate yourself of uh, old conditioning, regardless of its origin or ultimately of its intensity. So I hope that that is clear to you, because I'm offering it to you so that you can make use of it. And then before we wrap up, there's one thing that says it seems odd to let go of a feeling of tension if I know as a fact it's somatic tension happening. The feeling feels true, but maybe it has no connection to that. Guess it should feel strange because your whole uh because up to now, up to a certain point, you've lived predominantly, so predominantly in slumber, that like psychic slumber, that you don't even know what wakefulness is, and to actually wake up is confusing because you're waking up from what seems like an eternal dream, and you don't know what reality is, but you've thought of that dream as reality, and as the dream becomes fuzzy and unclear in its actual nature as a illusion, as a play becomes apparent to you, as its dreamlike quality becomes apparent to you, then yes, it's an interesting thing. It is quite strange to realize I'm not who I thought I was. Okay, so thank you everybody for your participation today, and I hope that you find this valuable. And if you have any questions or doubts or anything else, you can let me know, and I'd be happy to try to help you with that. So thank you. Blessings to you all, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.